We wear masks in our professional lives for a reason. There is a context, an expectation, a service that people are expecting, something they're offering their hard-earned money for sometimes, right? And everyone we know is more than who they present to be at work. So let me just make sure you understand that. I know that you are more than your job, but that is another sermon. So we're going to talk about how we often put on a mask at work in order to get the job done. We put on a mask at work because in that setting, we are not free to be unedited. We're not free to say all of what we think or feel, especially in front of our supervisor or about our supervisors. But you know, I'm talking about other people, Marlin. That's not the case for me. I can say what I like to say. The self-editing, though, not only helps us keep our jobs, it can help us learn how to be strategic about how we present ourselves in other areas of our lives. We have to choose carefully, selecting when and how we remove our masks and when we choose to come face to face. The Hebrew Scriptures addresses this issue of effective disclosure in an inspiring story about Esther. Y'all know the story about Esther, right? Yeah? You just said no. There's some people who don't, right? Well, let me refresh your memory just a little bit. The story begins at a point when the king of Persia and some of his buddies have been drinking all night long. And the king decides that he would like to call the queen in and have her parade around before them to show off her beauty. And this does not sit well with the queen. So when she refuses to be objectified by his royal drunken highness, that queen is cast out of the king's court. And the king then begins to look for a new queen. So into the court walks Esther, this gorgeous and charming young Jewish girl who immediately captures the king's heart. You see, Esther can pass. Do you know what I mean by that? Esther can pass. Her beauty hid her heritage of being Jewish, so it was not obvious to the king. So she was able to get inside. See, Esther happened to be an orphan who was raised by her cousin Mordecai. Mordecai found a way to gain her access into the king's quarters, but he told her, "Don't tell anyone in the court that you're a Jew." So Esther followed his advice, and soon she was crowned, actually, queen of the empire. So at one point, Mordecai angers this king's corrupt chief officer named Haman because he refuses to bow down before him. And Haman is this very power-hungry tyrant, and he responds to Mordecai's disrespect by convincing the king to let him announce a royal decree to kill all of the Jews in the empire. Well, that would include the queen, right? So Mordecai then sends a message to Esther and says that she must use her time with the king's ear to employ the king to intercede on behalf of her people. Now, at first, Esther is very hesitant to step up. The rules of the day say that if anyone comes into the royal presence of the inner court without first being summoned, that they are put to death. So she explains her hesitancy to Mordecai. And Mordecai learns that Esther's hesitant, and he says, "Perhaps it is for such a time as this that you have become queen. Perhaps it is for such a time as this." So in the end, the Jews are saved because Esther was able to build ground with the king, to build a relationship with him. And then she had the courage and the willingness to take the risk of revealing her heritage in order to save her people. You see, if Esther had announced from the beginning that she was a Jew, she would have never have gained entrance to the kingdom. She would not have had the king's ear and therefore the power to be able to change the king's mind without careful and intentional disclosure. The Hebrew Scriptures teach us that Esther wore the mask until her self-disclosure had a purpose. Esther was strategic and purposeful with her vulnerability. It was the right time for her to be able to share that. The Hebrew Scriptures tell us that the masks that we wear can sometimes protect us, and at other times they give us the necessary power to help maybe not only us, but to help save lives. So the question that this ancient story asks us to consider today is when and where we put on our masks. When in your life do you pass? And when do you reveal or disclose some part of yourself? Is it for such a time as this? Sometimes it is absolutely appropriate to save face, to not show all of our cards at once, to interface with the world through a particular mask that we are wearing. There is nothing wrong with intentional and strategic vulnerability. But what we don't want is for you to be a flasher. We need the skill of decorum to know which mask to wear, what filter to use in a given situation, wearing the right face for the appropriate context. We can learn from the Scriptures and from our own experience to make strategic use of that vulnerability to build relationships. We can be intentional about how and when we choose to show which mask. But if your purpose is to build relationships and to have lasting connections, we don't need to lead with our most personal mask. See, people talk about the weather and sports and the latest issue of People magazine and what Martha was wearing to church that day for a reason. They're trying to build ground with one another. So what I want you to remember from our time this morning is this the right time? Such a time as this. Is this the right time? And is this the right mask? Sometimes we are wearing a monkey suit. Is this the right time? And is this the right mask? And sometimes it's a lion suit. Is this the right time? And is this the right mask? And sometimes we have the privilege of being able to pass and move around with others who may not like the fact that they know we were there. So sometimes we wear the face of Esther. And the question is this the right time? Is this the right mask? May each and every Halloween serve as a reminder to check yourself about the right time and the right mask. Happy Halloween. Blessed be.